Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 8th of April. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. We open with this morning's terror attack in the northern West Bank that left 2 soldiers injured, including one critically, near the village of Sinjil in Samaria. Both victims are 20-year-old medics assigned to the Home Front Command's Tavor Battalion. Staff Sergeant Tomer Lan said that he was standing outside an IDF vehicle near the entrance of the Ma'ale Levona settlement when a passing Palestinian stabbed him twice in the back. The terrorist then repeatedly stabbed the other soldier sitting inside the vehicle before he could react. Lan then managed to shoot and kill the assailant, who has been identified as Sinjil resident 27-year-old Mohammed Jasser Carrara. Magen David Adom spokesman Zaki Heller told Israel Radio that after paramedics provided the troops with initial treatment at the site, they were evacuated by ambulance to the Shaare Zedek Hospital in Jerusalem. The head of the hospital's trauma unit, Dr. Ofer Marin, said that the unnamed soldier lost a great deal of blood from stab wounds to his neck and head, and that he has been sedated and placed on a respirator. Carrara's body was taken to the El Greenberg National Institute of Forensic Medicine in Tel Aviv for examination. Security forces searched his home and questioned his father, who was not arrested. In other news, Iran will begin using its latest generation Ir8 centrifuges as soon as its nuclear deal with the world powers goes into effect. Well, that's what Iran's foreign minister and nuclear chief told Tehran's member of parliament yesterday in what would be a breach of the terms the U.S. published framework terms. The State Department, meanwhile, was busy walking back comments made by U.S. President Barack Obama. IBA's Eli Wogelenter brings us more in this report.
Despite the recent understanding between the Islamic Republic and P5+1 world powers, Iranian officials are waiting for a nuclear deal to come into effect to launch its newest generation of Ir8 centrifuges to enrich uranium. According to Iran's Fars news agency, Foreign Minister Mohammad Zarif promised Iranian legislators in a closed-door session that the move to use the Ir8 centrifuges are permitted under the terms of the nuclear framework deal, and that Iran would inject UF6 gas into the latest generation of its centrifuge machines as soon as a final nuclear deal goes into effect by Tehran and the 6 world powers. If accurate, the report makes a mockery of the much-hailed framework agreement with Iran, since such a move clearly breaches the U.S. published terms of the deal and would dramatically accelerate Iran's potential progress to the bomb. Parameters of the deal revealed by the U.S. state that only the most basic first-generation IR-1 centrifuges can be used by Iran. Any other model is banned for at least 10 years. The IR-8 centrifuge is believed to have the ability to enrich uranium 20 times faster than the current IR-1 centrifuge, which the Islamic Republic currently uses. In an interview with NPR, President Barack Obama stated that with or without a deal, Iran will still enrich uranium and ultimately possess nuclear capabilities, and that by the year 2028, the breakout time would have shrunk almost down to 0. In effect, Obama was admitting that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was correct when he said that the sunset clause in the nuclear deal paves the way for Iran to get nuclear weapons. Obama's comment resulted in a firestorm of controversy. State Department spokeswoman Marie Harf said yesterday that the president was a little mixed up during the interview when explaining Iran's breakout potential, and that he was referring to a hypothetical case of what would happen without a deal.
The idea simply... I think that people are referring to, I think his words were a little mixed up there, but what he was referring to is a scenario in which there was no deal. And if you go back and look at the transcript, I know it's a little confusing. I spoke to the folks at the White House and read it a few times. It's my understanding that he was referring to, even though it was a little muddled in the words, to a scenario in which there was no deal.
But I thought that without a deal, they would break out in 2 to 3 months.
Correct.
Not 13 years.
Right. He wasn't saying something different. It was more of a hypothetical. Well, look, without a deal, this is what could possibly happen. He was not indicating what would happen under an agreement in those years.
So after 13 years, if there is a deal based on the parameters that you got in Lausanne, the administration's contention is that they still would not be able to, they would still not be able to produce, they would still be a year away?
Well, as we've said, we needed to get to a year breakout, up to at least a year breakout time for at least 10 years, given that we're still, part of the negotiations remains what happens to some of those pieces in those further on years. I don't have a specific breakout time to put onto those years at this point, but obviously we want as long of a breakout time for as long as possible.
Prime Minister Netanyahu kept up his offensive against the framework nuclear deal, saying it fails to address Tehran's long-range missile arsenal. Taking to his official Twitter account, Netanyahu asked, why doesn't the framework address Iran's intercontinental ballistic missile program, whose sole purpose is to carry nuclear payloads? I think this deal is a dream deal for Iran, and it's a nightmare deal for the rest of the world. Netanyahu also said the economic benefits from unfreezing over $100 billion as part of the agreement would fund Iran-sponsored radicals across the Middle East. Ellie Wogelanter, IBA News.
It has just been announced that the body of a man found in the ruins of a Berlin church on Easter Sunday was carrying an Israeli passport. German police said that the victim had massive head injuries and that 3 people have come forward with information about the incident. At this time, it is unknown whether the victim was an Israeli national or was in possession of the passport for other purposes. The Israeli embassy is coordinating with German officials about the case. And a 40-year-old hiker fell to his death in a Judean desert yesterday. Emergency rescue teams have had their hands full during this Passover holiday, which has seen hundreds of thousands of visitors converging on parks and nature reserves across the country, with not all of their excursions ending well, as we hear in this report from IBA's Ir8 O'Sullivan.
This is a common phenomenon during holiday periods in Israel, and to our regret, in no few instances it is also a fatal phenomenon. A hike that turned tragic, a holiday that ended in death. In Nahal Oz River Canyon in the Judean desert, a 40-year-old hiker fell 50 meters off a cliff yesterday. The site was completely inaccessible to vehicles and required an Air Force helicopter rescue attempt. The chopper lowered a doctor to the victim, who, alas, could only declare his death from a mortal blow to the head. The IDF rescue unit had no task other than to retrieve his body. Hundreds of thousands of visitors have descended on the nature parks and preserves across the country, but each one has their own danger, particularly to those who don't know how to take the proper safety precautions. Like people with medical issues going where they shouldn't, or parents taking young children to risky areas. Dehydration. Not obeying the proper instructions or avoiding the rules of the park rangers lead to tragedies. The Judean desert and the Negev are the usual sites of accidents, but the north too has its dangers. Steep slopes all present a potential slip and a quick plunge to the bottom. Israel invests huge sums and manpower hours to stage these complicated rescues. There were 6 rescue incidents in a 24-hour period just this week, including a night rescue of rappellers stuck in the Judean Desert Canyon. The folks who are involved in these rescue units ask just one thing: caution. Ir8 O'Sullivan for IBA News.
Passover and Easter were celebrated the same week this year, but the convergence of holidays has not translated into great success for incoming tourism. Travel maven and Zion Tours CEO Mark Feldman told IBA's Ir8 O'Sullivan that ongoing negative publicity about the country after this past summer's conflict with Gaza is preventing the tourism industry from bouncing back.
The situation is still pretty bad. Our poor weather outside is pretty indicative of how the situation is over the upcoming Passover and Easter holiday. Occupancy is barely at 70%, unfortunately.
What's it usually like at Passover?
Sold out, 100%. Usually, don't forget, Passover and Easter coincide. So we have a lot of Christians coming here for Easter, and we have a set group of Jews that are coming here, but the tourist, the leisure-oriented, is not.
What are the reasons for this? Is it the high price of the hotels and stays in Israel, or is it just like the dangers, people are afraid to come here?
No, look, the high prices have been going on for a long, long time. So sadly, that's nothing new. It's been almost 6 months of unmitigated negative publicity about Israel. It started with the war. It continued with some attacks in Jerusalem. And the negative reaction that's been happening with Obama and the Prime Minister of Israel has had an effect on people. And they've just chosen next year in Jerusalem, not this year.
You know, they have events coming in Jerusalem like the marathon, the Tel Aviv marathon. Are these bringing things?
Look, local specific events are bringing people, and there was a nice group, more for the Jerusalem marathon than the Tel Aviv marathon, of people popping over from Europe for a short trip. But coming for Passover or Easter usually entails a week, 10 days. It's an expensive proposition, and even with airfares at really historic lows, people aren't biting.
So what do you think is going to happen?
Look, the industry forecast for 2015 is still poor. We're not seeing groups coming this summer. less numbers for the birthright groups with the teens, less groups coming for family travel in the summer. Today, don't forget, with the euro so weak in Europe, the Americans are saying London and Paris seems a lot more reasonable than Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. There's another issue, don't forget, and that's Putin. The Russians, who used to come here in mass numbers, their economy's in shatters. They're also not coming here. So we used to have this huge influx of Russian tourism, primarily in the Dead Sea and Eilat, pretty much has dropped by 80%. It's not going to be a very, very strong year.
You know, a lot of the tourism coming to Israel is pilgrim-based, and they are not always deterred by the security situation as it's a leisure tourist. And yet you're saying that they too are not coming.
Well, again, the pilgrims for Easter are coming, but they still don't make up that large a number. Yes, they will be coming for Easter, and God willing, they'll be coming here for Christmas. But between Easter and Christmas, they don't come. So, you know, there'll be a lot of them coming in June and July, their normal summer tours, but there's still a drop in the bucket compared to the Jewish tourists from Paris and London and South Africa and North America. Those numbers are going to be down 20% unless there's some dramatic change in our overlooking environment.
So the ripple effect is that the hotel businesses, the tour guides are not having work, not just the airlines. It's a huge effect, right?
Yeah, the effect on the economy, unfortunately, is there. The hotels don't want to lower their prices dramatically to get more Israelis to stay there. It's still cheaper to fly abroad for Greece or close-by places than to stay in an Israeli hotel here. The government subsidies will continue to increase those hotels who can't make their thing, and the workers, no matter how much we may raise minimum wages in this country, will find it difficult to find employment in the tourism industry.
You're a prophet of doom.
It's not a prophet of doom. I think we have to understand that tourism always has ups and downs. So with the Pope visiting us last year, 2014, until the war, was a phenomenal year. We have to think long term. We have to invest in our infrastructure, in our roads. We have to invest in the sites that we can have here. It'll bounce back. Nothing lasts forever in our region. There'll be changes, and if 2015 won't be strong, I promise you 2016 will be a great year.
The Palestinian tactic of turning to international organizations to pressure the government is now threatening Israeli soccer. FIFA President Sepp Blatter said that the Palestinian allegations against Israel will be discussed at the upcoming FIFA conference at the end of May. We get more in this report from IBA's Dennis Zinn.
FIFA President Sepp Blatter announced yesterday at a press conference in Cairo that the Palestinian Football Federation has requested the suspension of Israel from the World Soccer governing body because of alleged restrictions of Palestinian players' movement between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank.
This is a very, very serious matter, and it is a case which has been debated at the last Executive Committee, and the Executive Committee has mandated the FIFA President, as it has been done 2 years ago already by the Congress, to deal directly this matter with the Palestinian authorities and the football of Palestine, but also with the Israeli authorities.
The Palestinian request was confirmed by Palestinian Football Federation chief Jibril Rajoub, who was the former head of Palestinian security forces under Yasser Arafat. Rajoub told IBA reporter Yoram Cohen that he will not accept the fact that Palestinian players cannot move between the West Bank and Gaza at will. Rajoub said that Israel deserves all possible condemnation because promises that were made last year by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to Blatter were not kept. He said that he now hopes that IDF commanders will think twice before sending forces, as they did last year, to raid the Football Federation offices in the Aram suburb of Ramallah. And he said they will also ask FIFA to ban play at the Teddy Stadium in Jerusalem because he alleges the facility was built on occupied Palestinian land. The head of the Israel Football Association, Rotem Kamer, said that the threat is immediate and serious because the Palestinians have an overwhelming majority of supporters in the FIFA world body. And he said it appears inevitable that Israeli soccer teams will be banned from participating in international events. Sport is now turning into a new playing field for an ongoing conflict. Dennis Zinn, IBA News.
The local African migrant community has issued a call to Uganda and Rwanda asking that they reject the government's request to accept the asylum seekers. Israel is home to about 45,000 Africans, including 34,000 from Eritrea and 8,000 from Sudan, some of whom survived the genocide in Darfur and the Nuba Mountains. All of the infiltrators are claiming that their lives would be endangered if they were forced to return home. Israel doesn't recognize the migrants as refugees, but rather as illegal workers seeking economic opportunity. The government has been pressuring and offering the migrants incentives to leave the country or to face prison. Thousands of migrants have been paid to leave, while the tens of thousands who have remained behind say that all that they are asking for are their basic human rights.
Madam Ziza, dear people of Rwanda and Rwanda, we have a short message for you from the people in Israel. There are 45,000 African asylum seekers in Israel. Some Israelis think that we should respect the international law, and as a country built by refugees, we should act according to the Refugee Convention. But the Israeli government simply doesn't want us here, and they are doing everything to deport us. So instead of checking individual requests for asylum, Israel is deporting African asylum seekers to your own country with no legal status. And the UN FTC are doing nothing to prevent this. Here in Israel, we are fighting against our government's policy. At the same time, you should ask yourself and your government, why do you agree to this? There are 350,000 refugees in Uganda and 72,000 refugees in Rwanda. Why should you accept 45,000 refugees more? Shouldn't Israel, is a modern democratic country, deal with its own refugees? And what do you get in return for accepting those people? Murakuze. Neaziza.
The number of those killed during the funeral of Rabbi Shmuel Rosner earlier this week has risen to 2. After 18-year-old Yitzchak Samet succumbed to the critical injuries that he sustained. He passed away this morning at the Beilinson Hospital in Petah Tikva and was buried in the Mount of Olives Cemetery in Jerusalem earlier this afternoon. 27-year-old Mordechai Garber of Ir8 was pronounced dead shortly after the rabbi's funeral, where severe overcrowding of an estimated 100,000 mourners led to many being trampled. 3 other victims remain hospitalized for their injuries. Turning now to Chicago, where Mayor Rahm Emanuel has been re-elected in what was a hard-fought battle against challenger Jesus Chuy Garcia. It was somewhat of an unusual race because it was nonpartisan, and both contenders are Democrats. Their 6-week campaign was seen as a symbol of the national American divide between the party's moderates and the less well-funded progressive wing, amid a backdrop of rising crime in the Midwestern city on the brink of financial crisis. The 55-year-old Emanuel and his wife are members of Chicago's Anashei Shalom B'nai Yisrael synagogue, and they have 1 daughter and 2 sons, one of whom, Zach, celebrated his bar mitzvah here in Jerusalem in 2010. The former Illinois congressman also served as one-time chief of staff at the Obama White House, and he was also a senior advisor to President Bill Clinton.
I have had the good fortune to serve 2 presidents. I've had the fortune of being elected to Congress. Being mayor of the city of Chicago is the greatest job I've ever had and the greatest job in the world. I am humbled. I am humbled at the opportunity to continue to serve you, the greatest city, with the greatest people for the next 4 years.
The White House has responded to CNN reports of cyber hacking of U.S. government computers. Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes acknowledged that previously disclosed cyber intrusions did occur in 2014, but he insisted that they failed to affect classified information. According to the CNN story, Russian hackers penetrated sensitive files on the State Department's computer system in recent months and gained access not only to unclassified matter, but also details of the president's schedule that weren't released to the public. White House spokesman Mark Strode declined to comment about the CNN attribution of the violations to Russia, but he did concede that because there is always vulnerability, there is a secured classified system, and that regular action is taken on the unclassified system to prevent such insecurity. Staying in the U.S., where a white police officer has been arrested in South Carolina for the murder of an unarmed African-American named Walter Scott, fueling charges of disproportionate use of force by police against the country's minority population. Officer Michael Slager was indicted by a North Charleston court less than an hour after a video of the shooting was brought to the attention of the local authorities. IBA reporter Alexander Jen has this story.
What happened today doesn't happen all the time. What if there was no video?
For Walter Scott, justice has been served as his alleged murderer has now been charged with homicide. This video of the shooting from a bystander was produced as evidence just yesterday, less than an hour after the Coast Guard veteran was convicted. The struggle began around 9:30 a.m. when Michael Slager pulled Scott over for a broken taillight. Scott then proceeds to flee after allegedly being tased. Then 33-year-old Slager shoots at the black father of four, 8 times. The coroner said 50-year-old Scott was struck 5 times, 3 times in the back, once in the upper buttocks, and once in the ear, though one of the bullets pierced his heart. As the victim lays face down on the grass of a vacant lot near a pawn shop, Slager arrests him.
And from the beginning, when it happened the first day, all we wanted was the truth. And I think through the process, we've received the truth.
Though the officer's attorney says his client believes he followed proper procedures, the video footage proves otherwise. The Supreme Court rules that an officer can shoot at a fleeing suspect only if he or she poses a significant threat of death or serious physical injury to the officer or others. And according to the evidence thus far, Scott did not have a weapon, nor did he pose a threat of death or injury. Scott's brother believes he ran from the officer because he was late on child support, and in South Carolina, that can get you arrested. Further investigations by the Justice Department and the South Carolina Division of the FBI are currently underway. This incident further inflames the current racial divide within the United States. With the murder of Walter Scott, we are reminded of cases like Michael Brown in Missouri, Eric Garner in Staten Island, and Tamir Rice in Cleveland. But this time, the truth is out. Alexander Jen for IBA News.
Here at home, President Reuven Rivlin took a brief break from his busy schedule as he appeared to spontaneously join renowned performer Ruchama Raz on stage at the Israeli Song Festival in Ein Gev last night. After bursting into song, he was warmly received with applause from the crowd, who included the smiling First Lady Nechama Rivlin, seated in the front row. Spirit, but I think he should keep his day job. And now taking a look at local finance, and the shekel today put in a mixed performance in foreign currency trading, while share prices were down across the board in a shortened trading day on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. Here's a look at the numbers. The IBA weather team tells us that even though tonight will remain warmer than usual for this time of year, it does look like our heat wave is moving on. And tomorrow we're going to see a significant drop in temperatures, partly cloudy skies and strong winds, accompanied by the chance of haze and light rain. Here's a look at the forecast at home and abroad over the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. We hope you'll tune in again tomorrow, same time, same channel, when I'll be back to bring the latest breaking news from Israel. I'm Ir8 Viner, wishing you a wonderful evening, Moadim L'Simcha, happy Passover, and Shalom from Jerusalem.